Well, I want to say thank you for coming on the show today and just taking the time out of your day to do this for me.
No, sincerely, it's kind of cool. So
Thank you.
thanks for wanting to interview me.
So I guess we should just jump right into the questions.
Okay.
So just my first one, but a little bit about your inspiration. What first inspired you to run for public office?
Um, I'm writing some of these ideas down because I should start reflecting on these things as in my 10th year. What inspired me is I taught American government for 33 years, and during those 33 years, from time to time, a kid would go, well, why don't you practice what you preach? And you keep telling us to get involved and leave the world a better place than you found it, and do your civic duty and civic engagement, and now and then a brave young person would raise their hand and go, "What exactly do you do?" And after 33 years in the classroom, I retired, and members of my party reached out to me just saying, "We hear you're retiring. Are you interested in running for state senate?" And I said, yeah. And I came home and I talked to my wife about it. And she says, you're going to suck at retirement. And so you need to do this, I think. And so I've been blessed. And so that's kind of what was the question?
What first inspired you to run for public office?
Oh, yeah. I'd say it was my students saying, why don't you, I wanted to model for my students what I tried to tell them what how to what their job responsibilities, so to speak, are in a Republican form of government. So, anyways, yeah.
Yeah. So did you say that you taught like civics or
I taught American government and American history for 33 years. And whenever I tell people I taught American government, the first line out of their mouth is always, well, that must have prepared you for this. And no,
not the
I
same?
wish I could go back and teach just a 90-minute class to all my students about all the things I got wrong, that I misinformed them about how a bill becomes a law 101 isn't exactly how a bill becomes a law.
Yeah. And then actually kind of a perfect stepping stone from that. What has been the a biggest challenge that you didn't expect going into to serving in public office as a public
Yeah,
servant?
we have a part-time legislature in Minnesota, and I guess I was surprised at the workload, the number of hours. And it's all 95% of it's so enjoyable, meeting constituents and lobbyists and former students that are now working at fill in the blank, that want to meet
Yeah.
with me and bend my ear on a topic that's important to them. But yeah, I'd say the one thing that surprised me was the when we're not in session, the number of hours a week that we spend on doing our job, and it's all enjoyable. I was just surprised at the amount of hours.
Yeah. And then kind of just for some context, what would you say the hours typically look like?
During session, so January through May, um, 50 hours a week, and then there's days, maybe 20 since I in my 10 years, where we worked like until 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, started 8 a.m. the previous day. There hasn't been many of those, but those are hard, especially if you have young kids at home, which I do not, or you have another job, that you're a lawyer, an accountant, or a business person, that you just thought it would be January through May, and then the rest of the year you could have your raise kids or have a job. And I'm full on retired, and my kids are in their 30s, and I don't know how some legislators do it, because when we're not in session, it can vary, but for sure, 10 hours a week. But this week here, that we're in right now, looking at my workload, I'd say it might be a 30-hour week, and we're not in session.
Yeah.
Um,
And so I think I remember I was talking to, I think it was Representative Larry Kraft, and I
Mm.
think he said that he feels like the state that the schedule should be shifted to consider it like a full-time job with a full-time salary, because kind of it stops people from being able to get into it as much if they don't have like necessarily the financial background and safety net that other people might have. Would you say that you agree with that, or what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, first of all, that's a great question. And what I've seen, it's supposed to be a part-time legislature so that you're not a full-time politician and that you go back after session and you go back into the classroom or your law firm or your real estate business so that you can be back with the people. And that was the or farm, it would be a good example given when the Constitution was written, Minnesota state constitution. But um younger people, younger senators do want a full-time legislature. It seems my Senate colleagues in their 20s and 30s, that's something they kind of push for. I think if you talk to older senators like myself, I'm a little hesitant. The framers knew a part-time legislature that when you were done, you were back in the trenches, so to speak, doing your job as a human being. I'm kind of lying still in that camp. But I certainly, given the last my first 3 or 4 years in the Senate, it kind of was a part-time job, but the last couple years, for a myriad of reasons,
Mhm.
it just has become increasingly more of a lot of work outside of January backslash February through May. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know a lot of states do have a full-time legislature, and it's more expensive. I mean, we get about 50 grand a year's salary part-time, and if we go full-time, they're gonna have to, people aren't gonna do it for 50 grand.
Yeah,
So they might want 100 grand or whatever a salary would be.
yeah, and you kind of mentioned keeping it part time to keep people like in the trenches, as you said, but really, I think keep them connected to like their constituents and sort of down to earth, away from the sort of politician, like full time politician image.
Yeah, well said. I liked what you two phrases you used, down to earth and in the something you said something else. Right on. Yeah.
And then kind of going back, this whole thing started from the challenges. On the flip side, after being elected, what has been the most rewarding part of serving in Congress?
Um, yeah, okay, it's the state legislature. I'm not fortunate enough to be in Congress in
That's
Washington,
yeah,
D.C. No, those people, I don't know how they do it. My complaints of the work of them hours, theirs is quadruple what I have to. Now, granted, they get about 4 times what I get in salary, but yeah, they work very hard. Congress does. Okay, so you threw me off when you said Congress. What was the
I know.
question?
So what was the rewarding part of
Oh,
your public service career so far?
yeah, it's come from the number, sincerely, and I know I'm talking to a young person right now, but I mean this, the number of young people that give their heart and soul towards this Republican form of government, and the number of 20 somethings that work at the Capitol that are people like Eileen that you saw earlier, and my staff, they're just a bunch of young people that some continue on in their political and public policy world that they're in, and some use this as a stepping stone into other professions. But they can always say, I worked for the GOP or the DFL at the Minnesota legislature, and it's just a wonderful place to work. And the other thing, so that because one of the things that I loved about teaching is it kept me young, being around a bunch of 16, 17-year-olds every day, and just mean, it just kept me. I think most teachers would agree with that. That teaching's a wonderful profession because it does kind of keep you young. And then the other thing I love about this job, if that's kind of what you asked, is I just love it when young people come to the Capitol and either they come for the tour and then I get to give them a little tour, or they come lobby me. And I know I give this example a lot, but I had three high school students from Hopkins a few years ago come and lobby me about having period products be free in classrooms, and that meeting led to the bill that I sponsored and got passed, that now girls don't have to pay a quarter or go to the nurse's office for their period products. Now the state provides them for students, and that just came from three girls that came to my office one day, and they could have been, dating. They could have been doing anything that young
Yeah.
teenagers want to do, but they felt it was important to meet their senator and try to get him to buy into their idea. And I just love that part of this job is all these. I don't just everything about it. I mean, it's just great. I don't know. Everybody should do it for at least one cycle, and that was the intent, that they had 250 years ago, is that this would be something you would just do for a couple, terms, and then you'd move on and go back to the people and let someone else step up. And that, Washington's farewell address after two terms, that's kind of what he talks about is this was meant to be something you just did and experienced and then got out of the way for the next person.
Yeah. That's a really good response. Thank you. And sort of shifting into advice like for young people, especially connecting to that story that you just had there. For students like me and who others who might want to go into public service someday, what advice would you give to them?
Hmm. That's a uh, that's a great question. What advice? You know, um, the Constitution begins with the words "We the people" in order to form a more perfect union. And it goes on to say, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure the best tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings and liberty of ourselves and our posterity. Well, those first five or six words, we the people, in order to form more perfect union, we all have a responsibility. And citizens expect politicians to be perfect. That the bills they produce, the ideas, the laws, the statutes, and when they're not perfect, they complain. And the framers of the Constitution knew this document was going to be created by human beings, and we're not perfect. We're infallible. No, we're fallible, right? We, we're fallible, not infallible.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
fallible.
I think so too, but I'm not sure. We might have to look that
Mhm.
up. Maybe Eileen's listening and by chance and is looking it up as we speak. But we're not perfect. And because we're not perfect, they knew that our government would never be perfect. But then they chose the words "we the people" in order to make a more perfect union. And they knew, like I said, it would never be perfect, but we should never stop aspiring for it to be more perfect than it is right now. And that'd be my advice to any young person: is get involved, join an activity, try to leave this world a little bit better than you found it. I always told my students that the meaning of life is to try to solve as much of the puzzle as possible before you perish, because we're all at birth given like this puzzle, this jigsaw puzzle, and we have to try to solve as much of it as we can in our 80 years on this planet. And so if part of solving that puzzle is public service, have at it, because I just wish that every single American had that sense of civic virtue and civic pride and civic engagement. And I just love this thing you're doing, because to me it's the epitome, and that you put on a tie and a jacket, because you respect the job that you're doing right now so much. And if more Americans and Minnesotans had that kind of I want to belong to something bigger than myself, this thing would work flawlessly. This thing called representative democracy. So that'd be my advice. Don't give up. Take that torch the previous generation has passed you and light the way for others.
Very well said. Thank you. That was an amazing answer. And then finally, just for like final closing question, when people look back on your career, what do you hope that they'll say you stood for?
I hope that they say I made teachers' lives a little bit easier, and that I made students um, ability the students the goal for all of us, regardless of age, but students in particular, is to try to get to self-actualization. And some people figure out like why they were born when they're 16, and some figured out when they're 12, and some don't figure it out until they're 66. But the Mark Twain once said that the two most important days in a person's life are the day they were born and the day they figured out why. And if through my and I know I serve on other committees, not just education, but because that was my career trajectory, and those are the 50% of the committees I serve on are deal with education issues. That's the thing that's most dear to my heart, and it's what I believe in. And so, if I've left the E12 public school system in Minnesota a little bit better, then mission accomplished.
Yeah, noble cause. Well, I want to say thank you for coming on the show today, and thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. You had some really good responses, and I'm sure that people will enjoy to listen to what you had to say.